Why does it look like that? Hmm. Guess I hit the wrong thing. All righty. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everybody? It's Wednesday. Almost there. All right, as I admit, folks, I'm going to go ahead and we looked at the video yesterday for 5.7 and 5.8. We're only going to look at 5 point because it's a short day, 5.15, and then I'll let you get back to the AP classroom so that you can finish answering those questions. But the questions for 5.7, 5.8, 15, and 16 have been assigned. So make sure that you've done those. This is a list of things that should be, as we are coming up on progress reports next week, all of these things should be completed by the end of the week. So you should have, most of you have done the 5.3 to 5.5. I think it's 5.14, some of you have not done, so make sure you do that one. I did a summary chart because as we go through sustainability, you are going to have, is it a good sustainable practice or bad sustainable practice? What is the advantage and disadvantage? So that's going to be something that we'll look at with everything in this unit 5. So I will come up with another table next week to cover the things that we're looking at in animals and as food topics. And then we'll look at the last topic, the pros and cons of the last topic, as well as far as we finish up unit 5. We probably won't do another unit test, and we'll just go on to the next unit after that. Because your FRQs, I'm going to use those as your major points. So which one of these? So the one for 15 is not multiple choice. That's an FRQ. That is not MCQ. So each of these will have one where you have to do written answers. Okay. All righty. Okay, almost everybody's in. All of you who come on time, I appreciate you. Y'all are such wonderful people. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, okay, and as soon as I finish this first video, I'm going to go and check for, I'm going to go into the AP Classroom and record those things that you've already done. Yes, so those are the things, and as what I did with this time. Okay, let me show you what I did this time. Then I'm gonna start doing this because just telling you 5.1, 5.7, all those doesn't always help you guys because they have different names when you go in the AP Classroom. So what I did this time, and I will continue to do, is I named them. So you want to do meat production, you want to do impacts of overfishing. Sustainable agriculture is the one that has the FRQs. So that one has the one where you have to do written answers. And then aquaculture has the 3 multiple choice questions. Okay, so I'm going to start putting it in as the titles so that when you go into the AP Classroom, it's not saying 5.5, 5 point, so on. Okay. So I will try my best to remember to do that as well. I am putting all of those scores together as one score in the grade book. So you'll see it lumped together like it says at the top. That's the way you'll see it in the grade book, 5.7, 5.8, 15, and 16. That's the way it'll say it in the grade book, and it's going to be worth 19 total points because I'm going to add all of these together. That way, once I take them from, rather than having 4 columns, I put them all together. All right. Okay, that being said, let's look at this video. Let me see if that actually switches screens for me. Or do I have to come out and go back in? All right, so like I said, I'm only going to show the one video today, and then I'll let you work on this. So this again is the one with the FRQ, where you have to answer the written part of the questions.
Be covering topic 5.15, which is sustainable agriculture. We'll be talking about a bunch of different sustainable agricultural methods. We'll talk about how they work, and most importantly, we'll talk about the environmental consequences that they solve. Our objective for the day is to be able to describe different sustainable agricultural techniques, and they'll kind of break down into 3 different categories. Those will be techniques aimed at preventing soil erosion, techniques that are aimed at improving soil nutrient levels, and then finally a technique called rotational grazing. Our skill that we'll practice at the end of today's video will be proposing a solution to an environmental problem. So the first group of solutions we'll be looking at are all aimed at soil conservation. So first of all, soil conservation is just agricultural techniques that are aimed at minimizing erosion. This is really important because in the United States, topsoil erodes 10 times faster than it forms. So it takes a long time for rocks to break down, for weathering to occur, but it does not take a long time for the wind and the rain and poor agricultural practices to erode topsoil. So it's really critical that we're thinking about how to conserve it. So why is this important? Well, it's going to prevent the loss of the nutrients that are in the topsoil. It's going to prevent the loss of moisture that's in the soil that plants need in order to grow. It's going to keep those decomposers in the topsoil that are really important there. And remember, organic matter is really important for retaining nutrients and moisture in the soil. So contour plowing is a method of soil conservation that involves plowing your agricultural lines parallel to your slopes instead of down your slopes. That's going to form kind of mini terraces that will catch water running down the slopes, carrying that precious topsoil. This is a picture of it so we can kind of understand that it makes these nice terraces. And again, these just act kind of like little guards to catch soil that's running off. Terracing is this idea of cutting flat platforms into a steep hillside. And these flat platforms will also catch water that could be carrying your topsoil off of your slopes during heavy rainfall. It's going to conserve water. It's going to conserve topsoil as well. So this is a really beneficial practice that can allow you to do agriculture in areas that are very steep and otherwise might become eroded too quickly to use. And finally, we have perennial crops. Perennial crops are crops that live year-round, so they're not necessarily harvested at the end of the year and the whole plant isn't taken out of the ground. We're going to leave the plant in place. It's going to have some root structure underneath the ground, and that's going to help preserve the topsoil by keeping it anchored in place. So you don't have to rip the whole plant out of the ground at the end of the harvest. A lot of that plant stays there, and it's just going to come back the next year. So we can see in the diagram here, when you have a more complex root structure, when you have larger plants that come back year after year, they're going to help retain a lot of the soil moisture, and they're going to help capture a lot of that runoff and prevent it from carrying your topsoil down the slope and away from your agricultural.
This is me, using my 5-year-old's dry erase table to try to make a point.
Woohoo! The spring is here!
Fields. Windbreaks are just trees or other plants that are planted around the agricultural fields in order to stop the force of the wind and prevent it from carrying so much of the topsoil away from the agricultural fields. A really beneficial component here is that they can also be used to generate firewood. You could plant fruit trees so that you're generating some income through fruit sales as well, a valuable habitat for pollinator species. So we can see an example here of just having this large kind of buffer strip along your crops so that the wind's force is reduced a little bit. This diagram can help us visualize how the wind will kind of be forced up and over the crops rather than passing straight over them and carrying away a lot of that topsoil. No-till is a method that is pretty straightforward. It just involves not tilling or mixing your agricultural fields at the end of the season. This is really beneficial because you can leave crop residue on your actual fields, and that crop residue is going to, 1, add organic matter to the soil, but 2, it acts like a kind of moisturizing layer, trapping moisture in the soil, and also it kind of anchors and holds the soil in place so that the wind is not able to blow it away as easily. This is going to prevent loose soil from being eroded, which is a big problem when you're using a tiller, which mixes up the soil and loosens it. So we can see in this diagram here, the soil that's not tilled is going to have this thick organic layer on it. That's going to hold in water. It's going to reduce runoff. But on the right, when we're tilling over and over again, that soil is going to become really dry. Remember, dry soil erodes more easily. And so tilling can, over time, lead to soil erosion. And then finally, we have strip cropping, which is kind of another name for intercropping. This is going to involve planting crops of different densities in alternating rows. So some crops like wheat are very dense. Other crops like corn are not very dense. And so when you plant a really dense crop in between your less dense crops, what you're going to do is catch some of the soil and water that might erode from those less tightly packed rows of corn. And this is going to help limit topsoil erosion and conserve water. The next methods that we look at here are all aimed at improving soil fertility, which is the level of key nutrients that are needed for plant growth. So replanting the same crops over and over again depletes the soil of the same nutrients over and over again. However, if you rotate your crops, what you give is the soil some time to recover. So some crops are really nitrogen demanding, like corn. And what you can do is actually intersperse your corn seasons with legumes. So these are plants like peas and beans, and they have beneficial nitrogen fixing bacteria in their roots that actually take atmospheric nitrogen, fix it, and return it to the soil. So after you've done some corn intensive seasons, that's going to deplete the nitrogen from your soil. You can plant legumes in between that to return nitrogen to the soil. And if you alternate using that pattern, over time, you should maintain fairly stable nitrogen levels instead of depleting them and having to constantly use synthetic fertilizers to bring them back up. Green manure is another method that can be used to improve fertility, but it can also limit erosion. So oftentimes after a crop is harvested, the fields are just left bare for the season. But if you plant what's called a cover crop, this is just a quick growing crop that grows in that off season or in between the harvest and replanting of your main crop. It's beneficial because its roots will stabilize the soil, limiting erosion. But once that cover crop is ready to be cleared, you can cut it down and leave the remains on the field, and it will act as what we call a green manure. One, it's going to break down over time and add nutrients back into the soil. But two, it's going to act like a moisturizing layer and prevent evaporation loss. So we can see a diagram here. There's a picture of that green manure being cut down and left on the field. And then this diagram helps us visualize that during the winter, when normally there's no crops, we can have certain crops like oats or clover, and then they can be clipped down. Their biomass is just left on the soil. It limits erosion. And then slowly over time, those nutrients will be released into the soil, and we're going to get better yields the following year when we plant our main crop because all of those nutrients are being returned to the soil. And finally, we have the addition of crushed limestone. So limestone releases calcium carbonate when it's placed into a soil, and this is good because that's a base and that will neutralize soil. So remember that when soil becomes too acidic, it has a really high H+ ion concentration, and H+ ions actually leach nutrients out of the soil by displacing positively charged ions. So they push them out of the soil and then the water leaches them away. That's a problem. So we can see here in this graph, as we become more acidic, as we're moving down in pH, all of those key nutrients are becoming less available. Limestone acts as a base though, which neutralizes your soil and moves it closer to 7. We can see that as we move up in pH or closer to 7, becoming more neutral, that's going to increase the level of nutrients that are retained in the soil. Another problem is that acidic soil makes toxic metals more soluble. So when your pH starts to drop, what you're going to see is a huge increase in the solubility of aluminum. Aluminum is a metal that's toxic to many plants. It can damage their roots and kill them if it reaches high enough concentrations. So adding limestone will also neutralize your pH and prevent aluminum from becoming soluble in your soil, which can kill your crops. And then finally, the calcium that's released with calcium carbonate is a needed plant nutrient as well. And so this can just further contribute to the fertility of soil.
Yeah, commercials in the weirdest
welcome
places.
to everyone around the world. Today is our biggest.
And finally, we have rotational grazing. So rotational grazing just involves moving animals that graze on grass through different pastures periodically so that they don't overgraze. Remember that overgrazing clips grass down too low to survive, so the grass over time will die. It also compacts the soil, so it's going to lead to erosion. But rotation actually promotes more growth than if the pasture were just left to its own growth. Now, this is because the plants are going to be clipped back to this sort of medium height where they are growing the fastest. So if animals are continually grazing, they keep the grass in its optimal growth stage. So remember that if grass is clipped too low, the roots can't grow and it's going to die. But if it's let to grow too long, it's going to actually die and go to seed, and we're going to have decreased growth and it's going to slow down. But if the animals are continually clipping the grass back to this optimal level of growth, we're actually going to see longer root structure over time as well. That's because the plant is continually in its rapid growth phase. And so it's going to be able to store more energy in its roots, and its roots will become longer and healthier over time. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if we're using rotational grazing and making sure that grass is never clipped down too low, and also that it's not allowed to just grow super long, that's going to actually promote faster growth than if we were to just leave the pastures alone. So our suggested science scale for practice FRQ 5.15 today is to make a claim that proposes a solution to an environmental problem. So I want you to take a look at this picture specifically.
All right, so we're not going to, your question, you have a different FRQ question in the AP classroom, so that's the one you'll be looking at. But I do want to say this, when you all do the milestone, and because we have seniors in the class and they leave earlier, we have to do an end project a little bit earlier than maybe some of your other classes. And what I was looking at doing rather than an exam is to create just one question that basically looks at, you have a choice of picking your topic, but we're going to look at what is the environmental advantage and disadvantage of whatever topic you pick. So be thinking about that. And I'll structure it a little bit better as we get closer to May, but be thinking about an environmental topic. And while you are studying for your, there's so many tests going on, your AP exam, that you keep these types of things in mind, because they ask that. Notice in this whole unit, the advantage, what is the environmental advantage? What is the environmental disadvantage of different techniques, of different procedures? That is a strong question that they're going to keep asking and asking and asking. So that's the way you need to look at most of these topics. We've done a lot of different headings, but all of them, as far as being a sustainable planet, all come back to what's good and what we do, things that we feel are good for the planet, but then what are the bad things? There's always a downside to anything that we do other than cost. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop talking. Again, we'll look at 16 on Friday. So you all go ahead and work on in the AP classroom on, if you haven't done 5, 8, and then 15. Again, 15 is the one that has an FRQ. So that one you have to do written answers for. Okay. All righty. And I will be checking on things that have already been submitted. All right, the downside to this class is I'm always having to check someplace else and bring the grades back over. So it takes a minute, but I am checking. If you have any questions, please ask. I found that he did, I don't know, it was just me today, but I found he was talking very fast. Please know that these videos are in your AP Classroom playlist, YouTube playlist, so you can watch them again. And also I don't assign the videos in the AP Classroom, but I said, all right, this video is in your YouTube playlist. I don't assign the ones in the AT class, but you can watch those as well. I always feel like one video is better than watching 3, but you can watch those as well.
everybody. It's Mr. Smeets. It's here.
Ayana, I sent you a message. Please check it. Okay, I will do that right now. See how I can do that. Always have to figure out how to do these things. I know it's possible. Give me 1 minute to that should say cleared. And I cleared it. Lord. Type too fast. Time goes so quickly. All right, there's only a few more minutes left to class. If you have any questions for me, if you're in a good spot, you're free to go. Just make sure that you, like some of you haven't done any of the 3 assigned questions yet, so please make sure you do that. If not, I will see you on Friday. Time goes so quickly.